Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, I wish I could sing because this is where I would sing. Here we go, Josh, in my best country twang. I mean, I am from the South, but there is no way, even if I could remotely sing, would I sing after hearing Jessie Buckley sing. I would not even attempt to do it because my goodness.
Yeah,
anyway, so
she's
we go.
amazing.
Here we go.
This is a movie that got away from both of us, I think. It came out a couple of years ago, 2018. It's Wild Rose. And you're right, it is kind of like a showcase piece, for lack of a better word, for someone like Jessie Buckley, someone who can act, someone who can sing, someone who's just beautiful on screen and who can play a complex character while being liked. Amazingly enough, you're rooting for her. You don't know what she did really necessarily, but I'm going to give a quick plot summary here and we can get kicked off talking about this movie. It's called Wild Rose. It's about a young woman from Glasgow, Scotland, and she's newly released from prison, has her eyes set on stardom as a country singer, all while figuring out her relationships with her mom and her two young children. You know, if you watch the trailer for this, you kind of know the plot of the movie pretty quickly, but I did enjoy the beginning of this film, how there's like a slow reveal as to what her complete life situation is at the beginning of the film. It's obviously based on the script and it starts there. And this movie was written by Nicole Taylor, and she has written for television. And I think that this was kind of a big deal for her. And I thought it was fairly well written, but I think that's, we're kind of burying the lead when talking about this movie. It's without someone like Jessie Buckley, I think it's hard to make this movie really stand up. So had you heard of this movie before I asked you about it?
No, nothing about it at all.
Jessie Buckley's been everywhere.
I don't get it.
Since then.
Yeah, but I really didn't come to know her for whatever reason until Judy. And she's got a very small part in that, but something about her made me look for her name. Then earlier this year with I'm Thinking of Ending Things, I really never put the two together, but halfway through that film I was like, oh yeah. And then you talking about Wild Rose, I went and did watch the trailer, and I'm really having a hard time realizing that that's the same person, but that's what a great actress does. My thing with not knowing it is that we are two people who live on the East Coast, who love movies, who have separate jobs and separate lives from the movies. We are not entrenched in movie land. Now, would we be? Maybe. I might. Could we be? Maybe. I might. But you have a separate life. Movies are your hobby. So for us to not know somebody's name or to know a song from a movie or to know a performance from a movie is kind of excusable because you can't see everything. But for the industry to not have shined a light on this performance and that song at the end, and at least Golden Globe nomination musical, how Jessie Buckley didn't get nominated, it's unbelievable. She was nominated for the BAFTA, so that's good. I don't know if it was a technicality, but how is this song at the end not nominated for original song at the Oscars? It makes no sense to me. But I guess there's 5 songs, and maybe this was just not on people's radar, but I don't get it because after you watch it, you're like, how could you not be talking about it?
Yeah, there's an elephant in the room here that we need to recognize, and that elephant is Lady Gaga in A Star Is Born. I mean, this is a very Star Is Born type movie, and that came out the same year as Wild Rose. It was a smaller movie, lower budget movie. It was released by Neon, which has released some great movies over the last few years, one of which is Parasite. So, I mean, they're well, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I mean, they released both of those movies within the last year and a half. They know how to pick them, but at the same time, it's not going to have the same kind of a weight behind it as something like A Star Is Born. But still, I think that separate from comparisons to Lady Gaga and comparisons between the two characters, I think Jessie Buckley holds her own. I first saw her in Chernobyl, and she has a somewhat small part. It's a mini series on HBO, and she plays the wife of a firefighter who is one of the first responders to the Chernobyl disaster. And we follow her throughout the whole miniseries, and she puts in a great performance there. And that's the first time I really kind of looked her up. And then from then going back and looking at a couple other things. And then, of course, seeing her, and I'm thinking of ending things. And Steph, actually, we watched Doolittle, and I wasn't looking forward to it, but it was innocuous. It only made me frustrated a handful of times, but she plays a very small part in Doolittle. She plays Queen Victoria, who's pretty much asleep the whole movie. It was neat to see her at least one other time, just seeing her on screen. But yeah, I think that she's definitely got a huge career ahead of her. But what is it specifically about this role and this performance that made you kind of sit up and take notice?
Well, they describe her in the movie as unstoppable or indestructible or something like that. I forget the term they use. I wish I had written it down. I forget the adjective that they use, but she is unstoppable. She is a force of nature. And I don't like using she's transcendent, she's a revelation, she's a force of nature. But there are some times when it's completely appropriate, because we had talked about this movie a while ago, and then we talked about doing it recently, and I saw the movie and you did not at that point. And I said, well, you should see it anyway, even if we're not going to talk about it on the podcast, because she's a revelation. And you were like, yeah, I figured. And so I don't know. When you described it at the beginning of the podcast, where she is a character that we like, regardless of her past or what she's exhibited at this point. I mean, she gets out of jail and sleeps with her boyfriend on a big field underneath 3 apartment complexes that are high rises. There's no way they didn't get seen.
Before she goes and sees her kids.
That I think is semi-excusable. I mean, there are things, man. Anyway, because after you see your kids, even though that's part of the plot line, anyway. So she's a force of nature, and it's just a unapologetic character. And also, it seems like she's completely I think they say she's overly confident, maybe is what they say in the movie, but she just has this powerful confidence about her, even though she's going through a lot of stuff. But like when she walks back into the Glasgow Grand Ole Opry, the shot is really brilliant because it's of her feet. Walking through a door, by the way, which is a motif in this movie. And you can just tell by the way she walks that person is going to draw people's eyes when she enters the room. And she does. And it's just mind-boggling how beautiful her voice is. And she does that thing where she just sings a cappella when she's doing the video at Sophie Okonedo's house. Anybody who can just open their mouth and sing like that is impressive to me, because I cannot. But she sounds like herself, but also has a very distinct quality and tone to her voice. And it's powerful, and it just pulls you in. And I figured country music, drinking, and sports have no meaning in my life. None. And I'm from Virginia, and I'm 6'2", 200 and some odd pounds. So I'm not a small guy, and I should have played football, but I didn't. I have no interest. Drinking, I could take it or leave it. But in the movies, country music, drinking, and sports are amazing. I understand why people like country music when I watch a movie about country music. Mm-hmm. I understand why people like sports when I watch a movie about sports. And I just put drinking in there because it's something that I don't do that often. But I also understand when somebody gets lit in a movie, drunk-wise, it looks so elegant, even though it's not. So what is it about country music that sounds so great in movies? And I know a lot of the songs that are in this movie, other than the ones that she sings, and a couple that she does sing, when she goes to the Grand Ole Opry in Tennessee, that's not her song that she sings. Mm-hmm. And then they actually play that later, in the next shot, they actually play I think it blends into the song. So what it is about her, I don't know, but it is definitely it, whatever it is. And also Jessie Buckley, when you first look at her, she just seems like an everyday person, not a movie star, not an actress, not anything, but she just becomes stunningly beautiful after watching her for a while, because she's so real and she's so herself. And I find that infinitely more attractive than somebody who's just classically beautiful in our society's eyes. I am drawn to her in this movie. And I actually have to say again, it probably won't happen, but I'm thinking about ending things. She should be nominated for the Oscar for that. And I hope that in years to come, people look back on it and say, oh, maybe we should have thought about that. Because the amount of dialogue that she has that she has to pull off in that movie is mind-boggling, but she does it.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting question that I have about acting and performing a script. So I think that when there's heavy dialogue, whether it's Sorkinese or whether it's something like what Charlie Kaufman made her do in that movie, how much of it is, like you said, just running the gauntlet of getting through it versus imbuing a performance and an emotion on screen with less busyness. You can have a scene where somebody says a huge monologue, and you can have a scene where someone like looks at a picture, and they can have the same amount of emotional weight, but they're two totally different things.
I understand acting as a theoretical thing more than I understand it as a practical thing. So when I think about it and I analyze it, I have a grasp on it. But then when I'm given an opportunity to do it, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. None. I mean, I sort of know some stuff, but not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different for each thing. That's the first thing I would say. Second thing I would say is, if the actor is as prepared as obviously somebody like Jessie Buckley and Jesse Plemons have to be, you have to know that dialogue as if it's just ingrained in your soul. You have to. And I sent you an article about Tom Pelphrey from Ozark, and he has a 5-minute monologue, and he's also in Mank. He plays Mank's brother. And the one thing that he talks about in that article is how much he knew it. He knew the words backwards and forwards. And I think if it's well written, speaking of all of those screenwriters that you've just mentioned, including Jack Fincher, if it's on the page and you know the words, whatever emotional connection a person has with it comes out. It's inevitable. I mean, I've read scripts and have been bawling by the end of them because it was such an emotional experience, to the point where I couldn't even read the last scene because I was so into it. And I had never read it before, knew nothing about it before, but the words allowed me to have an emotional connection to it. So no, I don't think any actor goes into it just thinking, let's get through it, or let's just get these words out, that kind of stuff. What I find impossible for, especially both of the two actors in I'm Thinking About Ending Things, is that they're sitting in a car doing nothing, maybe drinking, maybe. But other than that, there's no action. There's no moving from one side of the set to the next, going to the desk and picking up a cigarette and lighting a cigarette, opening up a beer, finding your drugs, finding your condoms. I love how my mind always goes to those places, by the way. Whatever it may be. Yeah, I know, right? That's because that's happened to me in a play. That's why they went there. So an action can dictate an emotion. So when you're doing something, it becomes real because you're actually doing it. So the action can dictate the emotion, and vice versa. You know, if you're mad at somebody, you have to dart across the stage or dart across the screen at them. That running after them creates an emotion. So that's intertwined. But when you're sitting in a car doing nothing and you have 4 pages of dialogue, that's mind-bending. So it has to come down to intention. She has to either instinctually or, you know, she's a Shakespearean actress, by the way. I looked her up. I had no idea. And it makes sense. And I think we even talked about that with the Charlie Kaufman script, how it was Shakespeare-esque and how it's heavy like that. If you don't have an intention, or at least instinctually know an intention, I don't think it's ever going to work. So I want to manipulate the situation so I can get her into bed. You can play manipulate. You can play that intention. I want to blame him for the death of my mother because he was doing drugs with her. Once again, sex and drugs. But you can play blame. You can play that intention. I want to be sad. I want to be frightened. I want to be angry. You can't play that. That's what somebody's feeling about what you're playing, not what you can play. Does that make sense? You look very confused.
No, I'm just trying to figure out like that's Jessie Buckley in I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and then so Jessie Buckley in this movie it's not a crutch, and it's not she has like an on-ramp to this performance by being able to utilize music. And so I'm just thinking of certain scenes, like one of the most endearing scenes and the most fun scenes is her at Sofia Caneda's house. She gets a job to clean her house, and it's a upscale house, and she goes around and is vacuuming, and she's just dancing and singing, and she's like in her own little world. And it's great. It's a great scene. She's in her own little world to the point where it harkens back to Birdman, where you start seeing a bass player on the stairs and a drummer in the back. And as each of those fictitious players show up, their instrument shows up in the score or in the instrumentation of the song. So I thought that was really cool, really well done. And there's some really neat kind of shots, like especially like top-down shots. And so I see something like that, and I'm like, well, I would think it would be a little bit easier to play something like that and get across what your character is trying to get across. But she also has some really quiet scenes and difficult scenes, mainly with her children, trying to show us what she's going through. Because, you know, you could look at it like, why wouldn't you want to be with your kids? But there's this thing that's like pulling her away. And so she's got the difficult job of convincing us that it's worth it. And that's difficult. But I do think she pulled it off. I think that she was able to somehow make it work. So I'm just trying to figure that out from like an analytical standpoint, but it's all emotion. So it's really tough.
Well, I think the two scenes that you pointed out, or one of the two that we're going to talk about, is when she is doing that cleaning and she is really into the song. An actor always has an obstacle. You're always working against something. Well, she's probably working against that buzz because she takes a big swig of all that liquor before she does all of that. And then she has to force herself into cleaning. I mean, basically you don't see any of that, but you know, then she just gets into it because of the music. And I think that it might not be easier, but when you have that kind of, she probably is playing that music in her headsets to begin with. She probably have to in order to get all the rhythm of the scene correctly.
Yeah.
And by the way, that scene ends with a shot coming from the outside of the door in with the kids, by the way, another door shot. It's something I noticed the second time I saw it. I was like, that's interesting. As for convincing us, it doesn't take much after she sings that song into the computer. After that, you know that this is not just some kind of like, I really like white cowboy boots and I really want to be a country singer because I want to break away from where I'm at in Scotland. And that's the furthest place away. And it's a pipe dream because I have no talent. She has the talent. I don't think, for me, the movie's not necessarily about convincing us that she can do it. The movie's about convincing herself that might not be where her life should be. And once she figures out where her priorities are, yeah, she has the talent. She knows it. She says it. I'm going to go use my talent. I'm going to go tone my craft. And the mom's like, craft. Julie Waters, by the way. So I think that different things make different scenes easier. You would think when you watch something like her laying in bed with her kids and when she wakes up and her kids are in bed with her, it's a beautiful little scene. That might have been easy breezy to shoot, you know, because she's there, the kids are there. You see the shot of 3 chords and the truth on her arm. So maybe her emotional integrity is right there. And maybe singing a song across somebody's hallway or living room into their hallway was a difficult shot because of the technicality of it. I mean, who knows? Then again, you could wake up and nothing could come to you about these kids. They're not your real kids. You know, they're like make-believe kids. So you might not have any emotional center to it. The interesting thing about acting for me is that it is not a conversation. You can't have a conversation about it. You can talk about it, but it doesn't mean anything. It's a just do it type of situation. So when you have an enormous amount of talent like she does, I would be interested to see what we would think would be hard pressed to pull off versus what she thought was hard pressed to pull off. But when somebody can open their mouth and sing like that, I don't understand that. So I can't imagine what it would be like to stand on stage and do something like that. So it's interesting.
Did you want to talk about Julie Walters or anybody else supporting actor wise or anything?
Well, I think that they do their jobs and they do it extremely well. And both those two actresses that we just talked about, Sophie Okonedo and Julie Walters, are Academy Award nominated actresses. And there's a reason why. Sophie Okonedo has a Tony. There's a reason why. You know, Julie Walters is Mrs. Weasley from the Harry Potter series. So, which she's unrecognizable in a way. You know, they obviously have her in a weight suit for the Harry Potter films and she has the red wig on. She has a lot of little powerful moments because there's a tone to her performance as the mother of a dysfunctional woman. And it's a very interesting tone that she strikes because a lot of people could be blaming her because it's your daughter who's in this situation. What didn't you do right? But she never comes across as a mother. There's a few times where she puts her foot down where she doesn't understand, but it's never about a mother-daughter relationship. It's about what's going to happen to the kids. I don't care what you do. You got to do something. She even says that. So it's interesting to me how sometimes we don't recognize hunkered down, believable performances because they're so real and they come across as real human beings that we don't talk about it. But I actually think those are harder things to do. And some of the way that the rhythm that Sophie Okonedo takes on, and I guess that's in the script too, is very interesting. And if you times I hear the dialogue in my head and then I imagine what it looks like on the page, and I'm thinking if it was written exactly how she just said it, that would be hard to interpret because she does some interesting things. So there's nothing like crazy spectacular we need to talk about, but they really just do their jobs well. They just do, all the way down to the neighbor and her boyfriend and the bar owner and the barkeep. She's great in that one sequence. She's great. What do they call it? Tied? No, what do they call the ankle bracelet? They call it something. You're tethered, you're tied. I can't remember. Yeah, there's a term. And the way
tag
that the barkeep says, tag. Yeah, I think it is tag. The way she says it to her is so, it casts more shade on her than I've seen in a person in a movie. And it's only one little dig. It's a real quick little dig. And you know instantaneously that there's a history between the two. The way that she says, hey, give me a beer. You know there's history between them. So you don't really need to mention much of what they do because they all do it so well. Nobody sticks out as not doing exactly what they needed to do to support the storyline.
So I want to hear about this door theory of yours.
I noticed the second time that I saw the film that the director shoots a lot of scenes from doorways. And at first I just thought it was my imagination. But of course there's a scene in the beginning where she's leaving prison and that's shot in that doorway, but that's been done before. Mm-hmm. Then there's a lot of things going on in the doorway of the person she works for, Sophie Okonedo's house. Then there is a scene where the mother and daughter are fighting and it's shot through a glass doorway that's blurry, like a dirty 4-pane doorway. And I was like, what's happening with these doors? And then of course that doorway, you see that shot of her walking into the bar and that goes through that doorway there. But there's a lot of prominent shots. There's a whole sequence in the hospital that's shot through the doorway. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if the director's trying to say that there are doorways keeping her in, there are doorways letting her out. I don't know what he's trying to say, but it is a constant thing throughout the movie. And I didn't know if that was supposed to be just an interesting shot, but it has to mean something because it reoccurs over and over again through the film. And if and when you ever get a chance to see it again, you'll notice it. But I take it you didn't notice it the first time you watched it.
Not as much. There are a couple scenes. One of them is a very spoilery scene that I won't necessarily talk about right now, but there are a couple scenes that I did notice how using a doorway gives you a lot because you have something in the foreground and you have something in the background. So you immediately are generating depth in the frame as opposed to just being like two people against a wall. There's no depth in the frame. But if you have the doorway in the foreground and then whatever else is happening in the background, it also separates the camera or the observer from what's going on. So it keeps us at either a safe distance or whatever else you want to say. And then having something like the panes of glass that are occluded, that are kind of like, foggy, that you can't see through, the translucent, then we're kind of, once again, like separated from that. But you're right. The whole fact of like her wanting to go to Nashville, there's a threshold she has to make the decision to cross. And that means a lot of things for all the people in her life. And so that's the whole movie right there, is whether she's going to decide to do that or not, whether she's going to have the opportunity to make that decision, or where she goes from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. And watching it with Steph, she loved it and she thought it was a great movie. And there were portions of the movie or times in the movie where she was like, no, that's not how it's supposed to happen. And I think that that's kind of a good thing, because we don't want a Law and Order episode where the guy moving the boxes is saying like, I don't know what happened. And then he runs away and then you catch him and then it turns out it's not him, it's some other guy. And you know what's going to happen in a Law and Order episode. So I guess there's something like that. There must just be some sort of like built-in comfort with that. But if you're trying to make a dynamic movie, you want to throw a few curveballs and you want to make people feel things throughout the film and not just at the very, very end, which I think this movie does both of those things. You definitely have a climactic scene at the end of the movie, but then you also have some great scenes in the middle. And I like your theory. I like your law. Sorry, your
Well, let's end this. Well, I don't know if it's a law. Let's end this with something that I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm writing them down. I'm writing them down. I'm writing them down. Then they're in the doorway at the Grand Ole Opry when she gets kicked out. They're in the doorway when they first have the conversation, her mother and her, when they first come back, when they're on their back patio, they're in the doorway there. So there's doorway. And then one of the first lines of that spectacular song at the end is, I wore out the stone on your doorway. So I don't know if the director picked up on that, or if, by the way, that song was partially written by Mary Steenburgen, by the way, Academy Award winner.
Yes, it's a crazy story.
That's crazy. That's so crazy. It's so great. So I don't know if they talked about a motif with wearing out the stones on your doorway, if that was part of the song, if that came from the director talking about it and Mary Steenburgen putting it into the song. I don't know if the song was created before. I don't know what it was, but if it was a song that was created separately from this movie and utilized in this movie, man, that's like some power that I just don't understand, because he definitely shoots scenes through these doorways. It definitely happens. And so when I heard that lyric, I was like, wow, that's either symmetry or they planned that. And either way, I love it because it works 100%. 100%. And you're right, doorways. It's an easy cliche, if you will, but he does it with such a subtle hand. And I keep saying him, Tom Harper. Yep. He does it with such a subtle hand that I never noticed the first time. And I love things like that because those shots are not accidental. They're done with purpose. And so he definitely wanted to show the storytelling process through some form of motif. And it's doorways. And I think that's a perfect kind of metaphor for the movie too, her walking through these doorways, because the doorways you're expecting her to walk through at the end of the film are not the doorways that she walks through. And you're right, I love Steph so much. That's not the way it should be. That is such a reaction that's like dead on.
So I think that we're to the point now where we can start talking about specific spoilers, because there's a doorway scene right at the very end. So if you haven't seen the movie, then definitely go check it out. I think it's on Hulu right now. When she comes back from Nashville, so she's gotten her chance to go to Nashville from her mom, and she goes out there and makes her play, and she just figures out what it's all about, and it helps her to put in relief her life and the things that are important, things that are not important. And when she comes back to Glasgow, and she's at her mom's door, and she walks through that's just a great scene because of the way that it's framed. You've got a wall kind of right in the center of the frame, and she's on one side of the wall, and there's a definite, as she walks in, it's a prolonged reveal. She sees the kids, and then she sees the mom, and it's kind of like it seems like the kids and the grandma have settled into what they think that their life is going to be, because they've already had this kind of interstitial, oh, mom's back, okay, well now she's going off to get famous. So they've settled in. So when they see her come back, they realize that she's made that choice. I mean, especially the mom does. I don't know about the kids, but it seems the kids are really excited to see her. So that's great. But it's a huge scene. And I think it has the potential to have the same emotional impact as the song at the very end. I mean, it has more impact on her life than the song at the end. But the song at the end is just kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae. But you're right. The doors and doorways play a huge part in that scene.
Well, I think the other thing that I noticed this time, and I on some level noticed it the first time I watched it, 3 Chords and the Truth, you think is about country music, or you think it's about music or how she feels about music, but it's not. It's her and her 2 kids. They are the 3 chords, and the truth is their love. And so that scene in the bed that I talked about earlier hit me hard this time, because that shot of her arm around her son says 3 chords and the truth. And the shot, see, I'm kind of digging on this guy, Tom Harper. I'm kind of digging on him because he does some interesting things, because you see the girl, well, Rose wakes up and then she's like, what's going on? Like something's not right, not uncomfortable, just something is not normal. And she realizes it's because her daughter's in bed with her. And the director shoots Rose, then shoots the little girl, and then slowly pans over to her arm, and there's the boy. So it's kind of like 3 separate shots in one. And so that's when I was like, oh, there are 3 chords in the truth. They're the 3 chords, and the truth is their love. And I thought,
That's cool.
that's some sappy, sentimental stuff, but I love it because it's done with such heart and such integrity that you can't deny it. And it's kind of subtle. You have to really be looking, or really in tune, no pun intended, in tune to the movie to pick those things up. So I don't know. I kind of dug it.
Yeah, I do think that Tom Harper has a good handle on shooting this film, because there's a few scenes in there that stood out to me. One of which we already talked about was her kind of dancing around and vacuuming, and another one was the performance at Susanna's house, where she gets on stage after, almost not even making it, but she gets on stage and she realizes that this isn't the way that she wants this to happen. She's super uncomfortable, and like you said, you can act an intent, intention. That's her intention, right? Is that what you're saying? Like, her intention is that she's uncomfortable and that she's out of sorts.
Well, those are adjectives to describe the quality of what you thought when you were watching her. An intention would be, I want to
get out,
fulfill my obligation. Yeah, I want to escape. I want to, but it has to be really strong. It has to be an adjective that is like really invokes an emotion. And for whatever reason, it works for me. When you're talking about something like blame, which is a very basic one, but it works, or manipulation or seductive, it changes everything you do. And so I'm not sure what her intention would have been at that point, because I think she walks into the party knowing she's not going to make it up on stage. And if she does make it up on stage, it's only because of her friend. Is it Susanna? Yeah. Only I want to please Susanna is probably how she got up on stage. And then when she saw what she saw, I don't know what the intention is. I'm never going to presume to understand somebody with talent like Jessie Buckley and what her intentions are. But it's more of think of it as a verb. Okay. Think of it as an action, not as in a qualifier or description.
But so you have a character who's feeling a certain way, but Tom Harper is able to use the particular shot in that at that point, it's a close-up shot on her face. But there's different ways to do a close-up. You could have your camera really far away and then have a really long lens, or essentially like zoom in on her face and make her face full in the frame. But what he does is he has a short lens. He has more of a wide angle lens, and he gets the camera really close to her. And he actually gets it like too close for comfort, makes it seem a little bit claustrophobic in the scene. And so I think that that's another way that you can bring those emotions out, just by a lens choice or by the particular framing. And then also the sound or sound design around her was a little bit more extra human. It was not what other people were hearing, but it was something that she was hearing that was kind of a cacophony of different things. So I thought that was a good way to get across what her feelings were. And that's just another example of being able to invoke an emotion just by choosing the right lens or just by choosing a particular framing. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Did you also notice that whenever she's singing, the room is brighter? When she sings on the computer, which we've talked about a couple of times, the shot goes from her and around the room. And as it comes back to her, the sun is beaming in the window. And she almost goes completely blurry. And it's kind of that J.J. Abrams thing that he does, where everything's kind of like
a lens flare,
blurry and skewed. Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's appropriate for the song too. But every time she's singing, there's a shot when she's on the real Grand Ole Opry, which I think the place in Glasgow would be mad that I just called that the real Grand Ole Opry, because that is the Grand Ole Opry in Glasgow. Yeah. But anyway, in the Tennessee one, the Grand Ole Opry, there's a shot where it's once again one of those shots where you're seeing it from the stage point of view. And as that scene is coming around her and coming in front of her, there's a spotlight that does those flares too. And it's like shining directly, well, of course, because it's a spotlight, but it's interesting how when she's singing, she's lit up more than, and that doesn't have anything to do with her being on stage. It's how he chose to light her when she's actually singing. It's interesting.
That's the cool stuff right there.
So I just looked up synonyms for run, and any of these would work. Cut and run, clear out, make tracks, take flight. Hot foot is one of them, which I think is funny. I just like the idea of hot foot. But bolt, bound, any of those are verbs that can be played. And so whether or not she wants to bolt out of there, just say, and usually there's an intention and there's an action and then there's a reason why. In other words, I want to manipulate him to believe, or I want to manipulate him to trust me so he gives me his bank account information. I'm not stealing from him. I'm manipulating him, although stealing could work too. I'm manipulating him to get something. I want something from him. So, obviously she's in that scene for a reason, but what gets her out of there is as important. Technically, talking about it seems impossible.
Yeah, does talking about it make it less interesting to you?
I don't mind analyzing something until I get the verb right. If I figure out what the verb is, then I want to play it. I don't want to talk about it after that point. I don't want to talk about my character motivation, none of that stuff. I will talk about all of that stuff, and I'm very interested in analyzing the script before I know the beats and before I know the intentions. But that I did decades ago that I still don't know what the intention is. And to this day, I'll stand on my patio in the middle of the night trying to figure out what the intention is. And then I think I've got it. And I'm like, okay, what good does that do? Because you're never going to play a 16-year-old again. So, but I'm still analyzing it. So no, I don't think breaking something down. I think that there are certain art forms. I think all art, actually, when you analyze it, as long as you're analyzing it to understand how you feel about it, I'm good with it. But if you're trying to analyze something to try to make somebody else see that it's art, I'll listen to that conversation, but I won't be involved in it because that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, that's why critics, even though some people might call us that, even though I don't think that's a term we're comfortable with, but that's why critics really are criticizing. They are analyzing it from a different point of view. They're not analyzing it. When I go home from a play or a movie or a concert or listening to something for the first time or the millionth time and I feel it, I don't analyze what I just felt, but I do want to express that. That's why Mank lit me up so much, because I think I understood that movie. So then I want to talk about it. But do I want to break it down and dissect it so I can make you understand it? No, it's just kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, you're right. I don't like dissecting things to be motivating to other people, but I do like dissecting things to help me to isolate what I think is valuable and what I think's not valuable, what I think is useful on screen and what I think isn't, and what is important to telling a story. And then being able to kind of put, whether it's two actors next to each other or two directors next to each other, and figure out what the benefits of one versus the other that's not even really true. I'm not like, it's not like a death match, Paul Thomas Anderson versus David Fincher or something. It's just like what makes them different? Why is Paul Thomas Anderson different than David Fincher? They're both directors. They both make movies. They've both made movies in the last 3 years. So what's the difference?
Thank God.
Yeah, I know, right? So what's the difference? That's the part that interests me.
Once again, we spent 6 years doing a podcast and I just ramble on, and in a matter of 2 sentences, you sum up what I was trying to say. So yes.
Sure.
Yes. It's so funny because I don't know how to explain things about what I feel, but I do feel an urge to try to, you know what it's like? It's like telling somebody your dream. Only you know what happened in your dream. And when you start to talk about your dream, it starts to sound different than what actually happened.
And also
to you.
Only you are interested in your dream. That's the other problem.
100%. Unless the other person's in there doing drugs or having sex, then it's way interesting to the other person. But other than that, it's just not. I just want to say sex and drugs again before we end the podcast.
Well, do you got anything else?
No, but I do encourage people to see this movie because this is one of those movies that people might just brush over, like a country singer. They might categorize it. And I definitely think it's a fully formed movie. It has beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't have any strange structural flashbacks or anything like that. It doesn't have any strange setups. It doesn't have anything like that. It's just a fully formed, well-told story. And because we have Tarantino, God bless him, and Paul Thomas Anderson, God bless him, and Fincher, God bless him, we have gotten used to art has to now be this discombobulated storytelling thing, which I love everything about it. Don't get me wrong. I love all 3 of those directors. I love what Tarantino has brought to our movie-going experience, and we've done tons of podcasts on it, so I don't have to prove it. I've said it. But there is something special about just storytelling, beginning, middle, and end, and something with a happy ending that is satisfying and it's not forced upon. The ending is not, it doesn't wrap it up really tightly. You can interpret stuff after the ending of the movie as what possibly could have happened or will happen or is happening. But it's nice to just once upon a time it every once in a while. Just once upon a time, there was this 20-something-year-old girl who got out of prison.
Yeah.
And then the story unfolds. And it's just nice. It's nice to see. It's nice to just watch.
I think the key about that final scene, that final performance that she has, where all the people are there and even the movers and shakers and the BBC are there, everybody's there. There's all these possibilities. But I think that the point of ending the movie there, at least what I got from it, was that why you end the movie there is because that is her in her element. You know, that is Rosalind in her element, and she is happy and fulfilled because she can look down and she can see her mom and she can see her kids and she's doing what she loves and she's making people happy. That's it. I don't know. She doesn't need to have a Nashville record contract. She can still have the life that she wants to live and still be happy. And yeah, she's got it all, even though she doesn't have a Nashville contract and all of those things. So,
yeah, see, the second time I saw it, I simplified it. First of all, I do want to make mention that it is a movie about a character that people are judging as soon as they see her. The person in the prison is judging her. The lady who is interviewing her is judging her. The person on the train is judging her. The husband in the car is judging her. She gets judged by the way she opens a gate that doesn't fully open. Because the lady is like, we have CCTV and you're being seen. And she's like, I didn't do anything. So she's being judged immediately. So don't judge a book by its cover is definitely a motif and a theme. But what I realized this time, the second time I saw it, it doesn't matter if she has the bigger crowd and that the BBC are there and that she's going to be famous. She learned to play guitar and write a song.
Write a song.
Because she says in the middle of the film, no, I don't play an instrument. No, I've never written my own music. And he's like, well, why not? And she's like, I don't know. So she grew. She became something other than what we saw her in the beginning of the film. And it didn't dawn on me. I just assumed, singer-songwriter, played guitar. But obviously, she had to learn to play guitar. A year later, she's learned at that point enough to get up there and do it and to sing her own songs. So the important thing is not what she's going to accomplish, not what she has accomplished, but she has taken 2 steps, huge in my opinion, because I can't play a guitar and I can't write a song, to being a better person just because she accomplished these 2 things. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, that's a great place to end it. You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can find us at facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. And you can also find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and Engineer podcast. And we'll see you next time.